This week on the SaaSy Sales Podcast, we meet Mike Powers, who's over at Autodesk. He got there by way of acquisition of Building Connected. A very interesting guy. He started his career as an engineer, not in tech, but in construction. We talk about the interesting challenge of deciding whether or not to hire for domain expertise or deep sales expertise. We also talk about what Autodesk did very, very well in terms of their acquisition and integration. Let's get into it. So Mike Powers, great to have you with us on the SaaSy Podcast this week. Very interested to hear about your journey. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk to you about some of the cool things that we're doing over at Autodesk.
Yeah, awesome. So now a little bit of backstory on you. You're currently at Autodesk by way of acquisition through Building Connected. Yep. Can you tell us a little bit about what your division of Autodesk does and what your role is?
Yeah, absolutely. So about almost a year and a half ago, Autodesk acquired Building Connected and a couple other startup companies to create a new group called Autodesk Construction Solutions, which is kind of like an incubator inside of Autodesk as a whole. Being such a large company, they really created an entity that really just focuses on construction. So my role is I'm the district manager for New York Metro, so the entire New York City metro area. I have 8 account executives underneath me, ranging from enterprise to small business. So kind of get a little bit of everything from multi-million-dollar contracts all the way down to really pretty transactional at like $2,300 a year, stuff like that.
Awesome. So I want to start right back early in your career, because you made a very interesting transition. You started off life as an engineer, right? And not an IT, not a computer engineer, right?
No. So I found Building Connected from actually being a user. So I was at a large general contractor that was using the application, really just saw the need in the niche that it fit for the industry, and started bugging the CEO when they had about 15 employees, asking for an interview, asking to be part of the team. He really wanted me to focus on the technical side, and I really leaned against that and wanted to focus on sales because that's really where you get the most engagement and show the most value to customers. So I pitched myself as an account executive, was an account executive for about a year at Building Connected, then moved into sales management roles. I actually attended your class, the SaaSy Sales Manager Frontline Management role, as kind of the first kickoff to my management career. And it's kind of blossomed from there. So managed one product, now I think 17 different product lines, which is pretty awesome.
That is amazing. So I want to talk about this because a lot of folks I talk to have this question mark over hiring for domain expertise versus pure sales skill. It's always a challenge. So some advice, given that you went through that transition, if I'm a new leader and I want to hire for domain expertise, do you have a perspective on when you should definitely hire someone with that deep domain expertise? And then we'll talk later about making that person successful.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing that we've seen is we didn't have like any technical sales executives or anything like that in the organization because of just how our transactions work. They're pretty small relative. So by me going in and being able to tell stories that really related to somebody, like I could walk into a meeting and like shake someone's hand and I was in their shoes, 2 years ago, and being able to relate that to my actual sales process. It was almost like you're not like that car salesman at all. You're really that educational seller where you're really providing value to the customer and you're becoming that partner, which is the biggest thing that we focused on was, we're not going to come in here and sell you a piece of software and you're not going to talk to us for a year. We're going to sell you one piece of software. We're going to partner with you to continue to sell you 16 pieces of software. So you're using all of the solutions that are at our hand. And my background and experience was able to kind of excel with that, which was really the impactful piece. So I was able to learn the sales process while I was able to leverage my industry experience as kind of like the crutch to get me into like be able to go into a sale and run a sale effectively.
It's really interesting, right? Do you have a perspective on the nature of a sale where you would lean toward getting a domain expert like yourself versus not? And the reason I'm asking this question is it comes up a lot, right? In particular, if you're selling, say, an enterprise resource planning system to banks or accounts, people are like, should we hire someone who's deep domain expert? Or I love your perspective on that.
I think the biggest, what we actually kind of like draw on this line in sales right now, where at Building Connected, when we were kind of just trying to get the application out there, right? Like, let's go in front of as many people as possible. You didn't have to have that firm of a line. Like I could go in, I could be the expert and be the salesperson. But now we're in these positions as we increase the ACV, that average contract value, when you're in 6-7 figures, like I can't be the one that's negotiating on price and also be the one that's selling them on feature sets, right? So that was kind of that shift. If you're down there at like small businesses and you're just transacting quickly, we didn't see much of an effect. But I go into a $1 billion organization and I put I can't be that sales expert that's walking, or I can't be the product expert that's walking through everything and then put a $600,000, $800,000 proposal in front of them. Just you kind of lose that credibility.
This is a very important point. I think you've made a wonderful distinction there. So what I'm hearing you say is at the more transactional level, the credibility of experience, the empathy, the let me show you how this would work type thing works fine, because as I think about that, you're selling to 1 or 2 decision makers, right?
Yep.
Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Smaller number of stakeholders. But then when you need to get to the nuances of enterprise scale, politics, buying committees, procurement, and then getting into heavy negotiation, that's where you want that person who's got those years and years of sales experience. Yeah,
absolutely. And we kind of attack it we have like a team of 3 really, where they'll have like an account executive who we consider like the quarterback. And then we'll have a TSE who focuses on pre-sale, right? Where it's just like going in, showing the application. Then we'll have a CSM that's kind of the handoff after the contract been signed. But since we're going to go back to them in 6 months and a year and resell them, like that account executive is still tagged to that account for a while, right? And that account executive is the business driver, right? He's going in, he or she's having a conversation, talking about value, talking about price. And then if they need to show the application, they will bring in that levers that TSE or levers that CSM, so they can kind of exclude themselves from that. And we've seen that really successful, and specifically shifting into more of an enterprise sale. We're really focusing on you can't just go in and sell point solutions anymore. The market is like there's 1,700 other companies that do the same exact similar thing. What value are you actually providing, right? So as an account executive, you really got to focus on that. And that's really what as a team, we're making that shift from transactional to enterprise sales. And that's a big step for a lot of these reps. And it's really focusing on using a lot of different methodologies of like commanding the message and commanding the sale and being able to really build a sell value to the customer, where you're creating that partnership as opposed to just like, hey, I'm going to come in here, you're going to sign up, and then I'll leave.
Got it. Yeah, this is really interesting because you're on the flip side of where most people are. Most organizations will have a pre-sales resource, call them a solutions architect or a sales engineer. And they're really helpful because if they get a person who has sales skills but doesn't have domain expertise, you pair them up with the SE, right? And they have the customer stories, they have the technical knowledge, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Sort of supports that onboarding. In your experience, it was different. You came in with the domain expertise but didn't have the sales skills at that time, right? You developed at that time. What advice would you give to a VP of sales who has that context, somebody that they might have hired out of industry but doesn't necessarily have all that knowledge? The first thing I think we've agreed is that person will succeed in SMB mid-market, but you can't throw them straight into enterprise. But if you're going to be successful at all, what's your advice around onboarding and helping them skill up?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it has a lot more to do with like handholding and like getting them into a process. I came from an engineering background, so I was very process oriented driven. So my bosses were able to just like, hey, like almost like hand over a process. They're like, hey, go replicate this, right? Here's how an successful rep operates. And we had like such good Salesforce and all the different pieces where you could track yourself. And since I was so analytically driven, I understood that like, hey, this is the thought process, or here's the training that I need to go through in order to be able to sell that position. And like selling is everyone can learn how to sell, right? It's just like you have to have the confidence. And we would start looking for like people that had like sports backgrounds and all these different things that had like the team mentality, because even if you're our engineer or domain expert, you still have that I can work with a team and I'm very competitively driven, and we can kind of teach the rest. From like a VP's perspective, it's really like, do you have the frontline managers in place that are willing to like have to lean in and almost carry a bag, be a player coach for those reps to get from technical expertise to sales expertise? So it's not something where you turn the switch. It's going to take 6 months to a year, but the runway of that and the upside in the back end is probably maybe higher. We don't know that. There's no analytics behind that, but there's that driving force has to be like really covered there.
And that's something we talked a lot about, didn't we, in our frontline course, that critical role of the coach hat that you have to wear while you're onboarding people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that topic then, What do you think? I mean, there are dozens of things we do as frontline sales managers and direct sales directors, but what do you think are the critical activities or practices that you employ that really move the needle in delivering productivity in your team?
Yeah, it's funny when I first, as of February 1, I got a whole new team. So we kind of like reorged the entire company. So the first thing I did was like really draw the line in the sand of like Salesforce hygiene or CRM hygiene, because if you can't see it, it's not happening, right? And that's the source of truth. So like that was like the first month was just focus on that. And then it's really going into each individual and figuring out their sales process and their sales motion, and then how they react better. So you're talking about these different hats, right? Each one of those reps has a different perspective of how they want to interact with the manager. So, if since I have a large range where I have these enterprise reps that have a lot of experience, is like, is it more hands off for them? You kind of give them a little bit more leash to start with, but it's funny, like as I'm now 2.5 months in, those people aren't as, knowledgeable and, efficient as they think they are. So they can need training. So it's like managing that piece, right? And like tweaking things for them like on a bigger scale, so you get them on the right path, but you're not like going in there and micromanaging them and saying like, hey, why don't you call John Smith? And that's like on the top end. You got to manage it that way, where you are more of a player coach. You're really helping them really develop those deals and have those deep conversations. Where you flip side, when you're looking at the transactional reps that are making a lot of calls, making 30-40 calls a day, working directly with the BDR, like that's more analytically driven. And you're going in as like, hey, why didn't you call John Smith, right? So it's managing those different entities and like rolling that all up to make sure they're effective. And then also like getting a pulse check with them of, where they are right now, where they want to be, and how you can help them get to that point to like show that value to them, has been very successful for me. And just like, and that's kind of like the mentality I've always used, where it's been like hands off, but I always like track analytics to make sure that they are effective. And then I proactively go in and, don't tell them what they're doing wrong, but it's more of like educating them on how that they can effectively do this better.
It's interesting listening to the way you talk about this. You're obviously cognizant of meeting people where they are at, because you're going to have super well developed reps, and then you're going to have their onboarding reps, and the nuance of knowing how to work with them in a way that they receive it well, right, and it delivers the results.
Yep, exactly. Because you're like, my enterprise rep has 10 accounts, right? So that story of going on 10 accounts and getting 7 figures of revenue this year is a lot different than a rep that has 3,000 accounts. That is, going in and saying, where can I drive value now? Where can I transact now to get to that number? They have a number that's 1/10 of the enterprise rep, but there's a different process and different motion that they're going to have to go through to get that point. But we still want to give and develop their career, and the fact where that territory rep can take that step up to that mid-market or that enterprise level if something were to happen. So we always have that bullpen of people in the organization that we never really lose a step, ideally.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, you've had one of the fortunate and rare experiences of going through an acquisition. I did the same with Yammer getting acquired by Microsoft. I think every time these large companies do it, they get better at it. Can you share with folks, what did Autodesk do particularly well, you think, to make that transition smooth, and let people know how long it's been since the acquisition?
Yeah. So Autodesk acquired 3 companies over the last 18 months, almost 20 months. One being the summer of 2018, another being summer of 2019. 2018, summer of 2018 for one application, fall of 2018 for another, and then winter of 2019 for Building Connected. So you can see over the last 18 to 20 months, 3 sales organizations have been absorbed by Autodesk. And what Autodesk has done very effectively is we've followed the methodology around like zone to win, where you create almost an incubator inside of Autodesk to create and drive revenue and almost give them the control inside that entity. So Autodesk Construction Solutions as a whole operates as a business unit. So we have a reporting structure, a team of driven engineers and sales people that are working together to drive to a common goal, which has been very impactful. So that executive team at Autodesk was very, very forward thinking in that, right? They didn't acquire and then just rip the software out and get rid of all the salespeople. We've actually drastically increased sales hires since the acquisition. So we're at a point where we were at Building Connected, there was 50 salespeople, and now we're closer to like 500 to 600, and that's rapidly growing. And you gotta start with the foundation, and then you gotta continue to educate those strong people. And Autodesk did a very good job of that. And it's always an open communication, like from the executives down. So from, Andrew Aganos, the CEO of the company, runs a Fortune 500 company, right? He's reporting to the street, but he was very personable. He does like one-on-ones. He does all these different things to make sure that this is a successful entity, because that's the time and effort that they put into this company.
Yeah, that's awesome. Love to hear that. In fact, we saw the same thing. I think it's really critical that executive leadership walks the floor and has their presence felt during these times, right? So everyone knows how valued they are. Yeah.
And then even around like working closely with the existing sales team at Autodesk was, now we're all part of the same team. So it wasn't, there was a transition period like there always is, right? But now everyone's completely aligned, and we are that one Autodesk, which is great, going in, talking to clients, going to meetings, because they have the experience. We're selling them the same clients, it's just different products. So it's being able to leverage all the different pieces of the puzzle as we build out this story for customers.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Alrighty. And in sort of the third part of our interviews, I always like to ask for some personal advice. What podcasts or books have you read that have been particularly helpful to you as a manager?
Yeah, it's funny. So before I actually made the transition into sales, I was looking for, one of the reasons why I left my previous company was I was looking for leaders and mentors. And I really couldn't find a solid mentor that I could look up to at the current organization I was at. So I leaned into books. So I read about 100 books a year, specifically around like nonfiction and biographies, to build like almost these stories around that. So one book that I've always recommended for people is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, where it's just the focus is around stoicism and controlling what's in your sphere of influence as opposed to what's outside your influence. So as a sales manager, specifically through this transition, right? Like I would instill on my team and inside myself that I only can control the things that I can control. You can't say, oh, this customer's upset with the sales rep that talked to them 18 months ago that was at Autodesk, where that's out of your control. So put that aside, put a little cap on that, and let's focus on the things that you can control now. So just relaying that, where Marcus Aurelius was able to run the largest empire ever through this mentality, we can run a company that has to bring in a certain amount of revenue a year. That's been a big driver for me.
Love it. That's fantastic. Yeah. All right, then. And to round things out, personal, other than that, in controlling what you can control, do you have any personal philosophies or ways of thinking that you'd like to share based on your professional journey?
For a professional journey, it's really focusing on, I've always tried to manage up in the sense of bringing value to the people that are above you, and almost fitting into a role before the role's defined. So the first piece there, and what I mean by that is everyone's always running with, especially in a startup world or a SaaS world, everyone's really running quickly. So what value can you bring to your boss now that's going to help make his or her job easier? So just think of different processes, different reports, different things that you can do to make that person easier. So always focused on that, and never ask for like credit along with it. It's just like, hey, this is something that's been successful for me. Maybe it's helpful for everybody else. And then from a second perspective, I already forgot what my other one was. I lost my train of thought. But that's been very important to me. That's what I say is like the driving force. And then blunt honesty has always been good too, where you're always being honest to the people above you, right? But then as we report down to your team and things, never bring that negativity of honesty down to them, and really kind of create a filter for them so that they can keep their line of focus on the things that they can focus on. I know that kind of goes back to the sphere of influence there, but that's been very successful for me. And I remember the last one was on creating positions that you want to fill. So before I even got promoted to the sales manager, I was just an AE, and I was reporting to my boss who had a couple of AEs underneath him at the time. And they weren't looking for like a team leader or anything, but I pretty much just went out of my way to help those reps be successful with my construction knowledge and kind of lean in on that. And then it was almost like a no-brainer for them to kind of just like hand the keys off as a sales manager to me in that role, since I was already fulfilling it. So I didn't go out and ask like, hey, I want to be a sales manager. I became one, and then I got the role and the title behind it. Especially in the beginning of your career, like you have a lot of time to make money. So don't worry about chasing the dollars right off the bat. Like chase the experiences that you can put in your toolbox so that you can be successful.
100%, couldn't agree more. We talk, it's a little cliche now, we talk about, 20s is for learning, 30s is for earning, right? And it's like, grow that asset. And I love your approach. I think it's a formula for success, which is be the person that you want them to expect of you, right? So if that sales management role's there, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's great. Yeah. Well, hey, Mike, thank you. It's been really fantastic having you with us today. I know the team's going to get a lot of value out of this. Very much appreciated.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Matt. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk soon.